Welcome to the Knox County Schools Career Expo session on Human Resource Hiring Practices, sponsored by Junior Achievement. In this session, you will learn from human resource professionals Brittany Daniels and Megan Holt on what they are looking for during the interview process. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, we're going to go over Interview Tactics 101. And we are going to first introduce ourselves and our roles within the company. So, Brittany, I'll let you go ahead and start.
I can hear now. Sorry, I couldn't hear you before. Apologies. Hi, my name is Brittany Daniels. I'm with Resource MFG. I've been with Resource MFG since December. Before that, I worked in the financial industry with a bank. And then when I was a teenager, I actually worked at Subway.
And I'm Megan Holt. I'm currently a staff performance manager with Resource MFG. The first position that I ever held was with Food City. I started there as a cashier and then transitioned to work in the bakery deli. After that, I went to college in Cookeville. My first position out of college was as an HR assistant with a medical facility. About 3 years ago, I moved back to Maryville, Tennessee, which is my hometown. I became employed with Resource MFG as a staffing assistant. Then I moved into a personnel supervisor role where I was interviewing folks and placing them on assignment with different manufacturing clients. And now I'm an on-site staff performance manager with one of those clients, which is Denso in Maryville. Is our presentation up and shared, Brittany?
I'm getting there.
Perfect.
Sorry. I don't know. There's a delay. Sorry. So today we're going to cover Interview Tactics 101 with myself and Megan.
Okay, so the first area that we are looking at is what you can do to be prepared before your interview. The first thing we have on here is to be sure that you have a copy of your resume handy to give to the interviewer. I would recommend taking multiple copies with you just because you might be meeting multiple people. It's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared, so I would have that physical copy of the resume with you. Next thing on here is know your skills and experience and be ready to talk about those. So make sure you review your resume, you feel comfortable speaking about the positions that you've held. Just make sure you really study that and you're really comfortable talking about yourself. The third thing on here is research the company that you have applied with. This shows that you have taken initiative to learn more about the company and about the job that you are applying for. It just leaves a really good impression. So you can also learn about the company and make decisions on if you want to move forward with the process based on that research. The fourth thing on here is to do some role play, especially if you're feeling nervous, just to get used to those interview questions and make sure you're really comfortable before you sit in front of that interviewer. Even if you're feeling really confident about the interview, I would also recommend doing some role play. It doesn't hurt to be prepared. So, sit down with a friend or a family member, just have them go over some mock interview questions with you just to practice. Next thing on here is to dress for success. Proper attire is very, very important. We actually have a clip at the end of the presentation just showing some differences between that, and we'll get into that later, but you want to dress the part. If you aren't sure how to dress for your interview, again, you can research the company. You can look at kind of what you think you would wear to the interview based on that research. Don't be afraid to ask as well. So as you're scheduling the interview, you can say, hey, I just want to make sure I understand your policy with dress. What do you recommend to wear to your interview process? The last thing on this slide is to think positive thoughts. So just go in there knowing that you are awesome, you've got this, be confident in who you are, and just know that you're going to rock that interview.
Then during your interview, one of the key things is to be on time. Best thing is to be early, especially if you're unsure of any traffic patterns or anything like that. Map out how long you think it'll take. Give yourself a little extra time to get there. First impression is most important, and being on time gives the interviewer your best foot forward and shows that you're respectful of their time as well. The next thing is to make eye contact and speak clearly. And that means make frequent eye contact, don't stare. That shows that you're engaged in the conversation that you're having. And then always speak clearly. If you're a fast speaker like myself, I have to practice slowing down when I speak so that others can understand what I'm saying. The next part is let the interviewer lead the conversation. They will start with asking you questions, and then you can engage in that conversation by answering their questions. And then at the end, most interviewers open up for you to be able to ask questions. Be prepared to have at least one or two questions to ask them as a follow up, and it can be about the job itself or the company or just something that you've been wanting to know that maybe you read during your research part before the interview. Listen carefully and don't be afraid to ask the interviewer to clarify or rephrase the question. So I know myself included, sometimes you can be nervous when you're in that situation. You can always bring a notepad and pen to write down some key points. That way you don't forget those when you're then answering. If you need a moment to collect your thoughts, it's perfectly acceptable to ask for a moment before providing your answer. So, give me just a moment. Let me collect my thoughts and then take that moment and then articulate that answer. And then remember to smile. So in Zoom, like we are now, it's definitely easier because we don't have to wear a mask. If your interview is in person, you can still tell when someone's smiling because you smile with your eyes. So make sure that you do that because it shows that you're really excited for the opportunity.
Okay, so the next section on here, we're going to go over the STAR method. This is something that you guys can use to answer a situational based question. So you want to look at a specific situation, the task that it involved, the action that you took, and the result of that situation. So just keep in mind the STAR method when you are asked a situational question. So we're going to give you an example of one. So for example, if the question is, describe the last time you did something just because it needed to be done, it wasn't part of your job duties. We're going to go over how we would answer that, and I'm going to let Miss Brittany go first.
So using the STAR method, my answer to the question of describe the last time that I did something just because it needed to be done, it wasn't part of my normal job responsibilities. I'll go back to the time that I was a manager at Subway. I was doing the inventory one evening. I was brought in, and that's just what I did on Tuesday nights. I was just there for inventory. I noticed a few things that needed to be done while I was there. Even though it wasn't part of my evening responsibilities, I went ahead and did the restock of the chips that sit out front. The other employee that was on duty was visually, I could definitely tell that she was busy. So I let that person know that I was going to go ahead and restock that because I acknowledged that she was busy. Afterwards, she thanked me, and it was definitely no extra sweat off my back to help out. So I described the situation, the task that I did, and the action that I took, and then the result. She was definitely very thankful for the extra pair of hands.
So for my example, it's kind of similar work environment. So the first job I ever held was at Food City. I worked in the bakery deli as a shift leader. So my task assigned to me for my shift was to do food prep, restocking of the deli, and to do a full clean of our facilities. That was all that I was supposed to be focused on when I went in. We had a customer come in, and Marge, one of my coworkers, was on a phone call with a customer. We had a customer come up to the counter. So I made sure that the customer was taken care of. So our number one goal is to always provide good customer service. The customer was very pleased that she got timely assistance, timely service from us, and Marge was thankful that she could focus on what she needed to without, having to jump off her call very quickly to take care of that situation. So that is an example of the STAR method. It's something you guys can use when you're answering those types of questions.
And then after the interview, there's always the what happens next. So when the interview wraps up, there are a couple of things that you can ask the interviewer as far as what that process looks like. So some questions that you could ask are, When are they looking to make a decision? What does the hiring timeline look like? Is there anything else you need from me? Some employers will go ahead and provide those first two parts. So when are they looking to make a decision and what that hiring timeline looks like. But you could still always ask, is there anything else you need from me? It's a very broad question, and it wouldn't be something they would have already answered in most cases. And then always thank the interviewer for their time. This can be definitely a verbal as you're leaving the room. I really appreciate your time today. I look forward to hearing from you. And then I've even encountered times where people will write a handwritten thank you note that just kind of adds a little something extra. And I think, when the employer looks back and is looking at their candidate pool, they'll think, oh, you know what? Brittany left us a thank you note. Like it'll be something that sticks out to them. And then the next part will be comfortable with waiting, but don't be afraid to follow up. So the waiting period is probably the most painful. It'll feel like an eternity has passed. But remember, they're also running a business. They have other things that they're doing as well as trying to hire someone. So on average, expect, a 1 to 2 week waiting period, but that doesn't mean you have to sit and wait. You can definitely follow up with the contact that you were given during that time frame, just to let them know, you're still waiting. Is there anything else that they need? But it can definitely feel like a long time. I've been there. So just be comfortable as you can. Stay busy during that time, but then don't be afraid to follow up once or twice, depending upon how long that wait is.
Okay. We talked earlier about dress code kind of during that interview process. And so this video is going to show you some differences between a couple situations. And it's talking about dressing appropriately for the interview and acting appropriately for the interview. So we'll go ahead and cue that up.
Hey, are you, like, Mr. Madison?
Miss Madison, I assume you're Travis Wilson. You're a bit late.
Oh, hey, sorry, man.
Have a seat.
Sure. Thanks, dude.
So, Mr. Wilson, do you have any experience in the insurance field?
Well, one time my dad showed me his, like, car insurance bill or something. He was, like, totally flipping out because of this really bad accident I got into. Oh, hold on. What's up? Oh, nothing. No, just in an interview.
Mr. Wilson.
Hi, Travis Wilson here for my 9 o'clock interview.
Ooh, right on time. Come on into my office.
Thank you. And here's an extra copy of my resume in case you need it.
Great, thanks. So, Mr. Wilson, do you have any experience in the insurance field?
No, ma'am, I don't, but people tell me that I'm a quick learner and I always welcome a challenge.
Good, I like that.
Thanks again. So, if you were Ms. Madison, would you hire me? Or would you hire me? When you're applying for a job, a positive attitude and enthusiasm can make all the difference. Dress appropriately. Be on time. Smile and make good eye contact. Be positive and upbeat when you talk about your training or work experience. That way, you'll show an employer that you want to be at work and that you're willing to do what it takes to get the job done. Yeah, whatever, dude. To find out more, just log on to our website.
Okay, so in these two examples, these were two very different types of interviews. they went, totally different directions. So you definitely want to make sure that you are dressing the part, you're dressing appropriately for the position that you are applying for. Cell phones in an interview room, that's always a big red flag or a big no. So just make sure you've got your cell phone put away and you've got the volume down on that and you're showing your full attention to the person who is interviewing you. The second gentleman did a really great job with experience. So sometimes positions that you go in for, you don't have previous experience, and that's okay. But you can say something like the second gentleman did, no, I don't have this exact experience, but I'm a quick learner. I'm willing to do what it takes. He's really showing that he wants that position and he's engaged in that process. So that second guy is more likely to get the position than the first guy was.
That concludes our piece on the Interview Tactics 101. We definitely welcome any questions that you may have about any of the elements that we discussed, the before, the during, and the after going through an interview.
Brittany and Megan, thank you all so much. We do have some questions from our audience. The first question is, what are the most common mistakes you have seen during interviews?
Megan, you want to give yours?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistakes that I have seen, kind of like the video showed, just being on the cell phone during the interview process, not dressing the part. I know that we want to be comfortable in an interview, but you definitely don't want to show up in your sweatpants and your t-shirt. You got to put a little bit of effort into your dress just because you want to show that you respect the interviewer's time and their attention. And so you want to show up ready to go. Also, dates of employment are very important. So if you take time to put your resume together and you know what you have done and you know when you have done it, I think that makes a better impression than someone who says, well, I can't remember when I held this position and I don't know when I left here. I don't know what I did. So just taking the time to be prepared and be attentive in the interview, I think, is what makes or breaks that process. What do you think, Brittany?
Yes, the dressing the part. I've seen a lot of the ripped jeans, just like the first gentleman in the video. And then I've also seen, and sometimes it is hard for you to talk about yourself, but during an interview, that's exactly what you are allowed to do. And I encourage you to do it, especially any accomplishments, any volunteer time, any extracurriculars that definitely pertain to what you could be doing for this job. Talk about those and be excited. A lot of times people just, they just answer the questions and then they don't share all the extra things that may not already be on the resume, but still that's definitely your moment to shine.
Thank you. This question goes along with that. What do you do if you don't know how to answer a question during the interview?
That's a good one. So don't be afraid to ask for a pause. I think the hardest question for me at first to answer was strengths and weaknesses, just because I think it's easier to pick out your weaknesses than your strengths sometimes. So when I was asked that the first time that I ever interviewed, I said, wow, that is a really good question. Can I have a moment just to think, because I want to give you a really good answer? And they really respect you being honest about that. So that's what I've done personally.
Yeah, and I've even asked too, can we come back to that one? Because maybe further down in our interview, I can come back to that and I'll have the answer. And it's definitely, I've even had people say, I really don't have an answer for that. And sometimes that's okay. And then there have been times where they'll say, well, can you rephrase that question a different way? And sometimes hearing the question with different wording helps spark that whatever that cylinder is in our brain that then gives me my answer. So you can definitely ask to rephrase the question too. That may trigger your response.
Thank you. What advice would you give to students who wanted to practice the interview process?
I think that role play piece is really important. And if you're practicing with a friend, and let's say neither one of you have ever been in an interview, you can always go online and you can search, best interview questions, or maybe you can ask a parent or grandparent or, someone who has gone through that interview process, what would you ask in an interview, and just take some notes and then really practice that role play piece just to get yourself comfortable with types of questions that you could see in the process.
Yeah, I remember my first, I was 14 and I was able to intern to help work for some money to pay for my school books when I went to college. So I had my dad be my interviewer. And so he set up a time and I dressed up and I went through the whole thing with him. That way, even though I'm comfortable with my dad, it still gave me the chance to do the full part, dress up. We set an appointment time to meet in the dining room. I had my notebook, I had my questions ready, and he downloaded some questions off the internet to ask me, just a few. It didn't, we didn't do the full interview time, but that role play really does help. And to this day, I still do role play for certain scenarios that I'm faced with at work.
Thank you. What would you say is more important, the resume or the interview?
I think they're both important in different ways, but you can definitely show more of your personality in an interview. So if you don't have a lot of experience to add to a resume, that's okay. I would still bring one, and maybe you can have your school on there, your extracurricular activities. But speaking with that interview, you have time, interviewer, you have time to shine and really show who you are and what you bring to the table. So I think it's important to have a resume, but if you don't have a lot of experience on that, it's okay, because as long as you can speak to who you are as a person and what you can do, it'll really take you far.
I agree with that, especially like when you're looking for your first job, which is coming up soon for you guys. A lot of those types of positions, looking good on paper is one thing, but they really want to see your personality, and you can't do that on paper. Being able to do that in person or on a Zoom interview, that's where you can really sell them. Of course, as you get older, they've got all kinds of computer things that look at resumes, but definitely starting out, it'll be a lot more efficient and easier to do the in-person, that personality that your resume will have a hard time conveying.
Some interviews today are over the phone or virtual, so are there any specific or special tips you would give for this process?
Sure. I think that even if you are on a virtual, like a Zoom call or a Teams call, or even over the phone, people can still hear your personality and your attitude over the phone. So if you're excited about that call and you're asking questions and you're very involved, you don't have to see someone to be able to hear, oh, this person is really excited and they're prepared and they're asking questions, and I feel like this person is a happy person. You can hear those things or see those things, over the phone or via Zoom. So just again, letting your personality shine, be genuine. Don't be afraid to be yourself, and just be as prepared as possible, and kind of treat it the same way as you would a normal interview, just with how you speak and what types of questions you would ask and things. Completely
agree. And remember to smile, because even though you may have a phone interview, you can hear when someone has that smile in their voice. It brings out, I don't know, your parents may say your customer service voice. It definitely brings out the happier side of your voice, even though they may not see you.
Is it always necessary to leave a thank you note or to send a thank you note after an interview?
I think that's personal preference. I think you should always verbally thank the interviewer. Definitely do that. But it's personal preference on if you would like to leave the handwritten note. I will tell you that it is going to leave an impression on that interviewer. We all like to get, I think, words of encouragement and nice things. I love handwritten letters and I hoard them. That's like my love language. So if I ever get a handwritten letter from someone who I have interviewed, I really take that to heart, and I'm very appreciative of that person. And to be honest with you, I feel like I would be more likely to hire that person if they took the extra time to do something like that. But not required, but personal preference, and I would say it makes you more memorable.
Yeah, it's definitely your flair. So, if you're one who can express yourself in words, a quick little note, and it doesn't even have to be anything elaborate. It can just be, I really appreciate your time today. I hope to hear from you. And then just put your name on there. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. But no, it is definitely not a requirement, but it is, just to Megan's point, it does feel good from the other side to have a little thank you note.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, so I'm going to make it a two-parter for you. First is, how did you learn about the interview process? How did you learn these skills that you gave for us today? And then also, what's the one piece of advice you might leave a student with before they were going into an interview?
Okay. So how did we learn about the interview process? I think part of it is being the person in the interview. Once you go through that process a couple of times, you kind of refine how you interview, but also being on the opposite end of it where we are now interviewing people for positions. It's kind of a combination of that, but mostly what it boils down to is just, being prepared and being yourself in that process, I think is the one piece of advice. So I'm kind of flowing into that second part. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And just, go in there with a good attitude, dress the part. I think how you present yourself is really going to make an impression on somebody. So even if you don't have all the right answers, even if you don't have all of the exact experience that they are looking for, if you go in there and you say, hey, I really love your company. I am willing to learn your processes. Do you have a position for me? I could see myself fitting in here. That's really what I think a lot of places look for, is just that personality, that determination, that work ethic.
And I'll start by answering the second part to that question first, then to answer the first part. So my piece of advice is the worst they can do is say no. So I gained all my experience from having lots and lots of interviews and being told no a lot of times. Especially starting out, I'm not going to have the most experience coming in at 16 or 17. So being told no was something I had to get used to, tough pill to swallow. But that's the worst they can do is say no. You jump back out there and you keep trying. And that's what shows, your motivation and drive to get that next position. But just remember, the worst they can do is say no, and you jump right back out there and you do it again.
Brittany, Megan, thank you all so much for some great information. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to meet with us today. We'd also like to thank Resource MFG and Junior Achievement of East Tennessee for helping sponsor this session. And we also want to thank the students out there for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.